Thank you so much for joining Forge Breast Cancer Survivor Center. We're here with our coffee conversations again, and we're so happy to have you all here. Today, we have Patty Cusick with us, and we're going to be talking about managing relationship with breast cancer. And there are so many relationships to discuss, and we're excited to talk about those with her. But Patty, before we start that discussion, if you could introduce yourself to everybody on the call so we can get to know you a little bit, and then we'll dive right in.
Absolutely. So my name is Patty Cusick. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I work for Oasis, and I've been here for a very long time. I've been here for 12 years. That's how much I love Oasis. It's a very special place for me. Um, I work primarily with some adolescents and, of course, women. And I do work with women with breast cancer and women with all sorts of other things going on in their life. Let's see, anything interesting about me? I'm married. I have a child, only one. I had her later in life, so I'm an older mama. And we live on a farm, which I grew up on. So that's kind of cool. We bought the home that I grew up in, and so now my husband and I and our daughter live on that farm. So that's kind of cool. Um, yeah, so other than that,
Well,
that's
awesome. So, like, what made you get into therapy? Like what drew you to the profession?
do you want the honest answer?
The very honest one.
All right, so my undergrad was actually in design, fashion. I thought I would be working on like movie sets and television and commercials and doing styling work and making stuff. So I moved to Philadelphia in 2000 and I started nannying, not right away, but eventually while I was living there. And so I started nannying for this large family. His wife had actually died of breast cancer, and his now wife was divorced. They each had three kids, so it's like the Brady Bunch. And so one of his kids, who was 14, at the time. We'll just say was going through a lot, had a really bad attitude. My gosh, that child really challenged me in ways I've not been challenged, and I've been challenged before. This kid was hard. And I remember his stepmom saying, if you want the job, I'm just going to let you know he does not give hugs. He's not affectionate. We've already had two other um, nanny personal assistants, try it out. They quit. So it's like, I'll give it a shot. And I did. And I stayed for a year. And the only reason I left was because I started grad school for counseling. But it was during that time when I figured that out and that I wanted to work with, at that time, primarily teenagers. Um, and then, of
That
course,
is brave, girl. Because I mean, I see teenagers and I just want to go the other way. Like, I don't even have time for it. Like, you
no,
are brave.
the best part is on my very last day, he came up to me and gave me a big hug and thanked me for just being a part of his life for that year. So I knew I was doing the right thing. And then I contacted him about 3 years later after I'd moved back to Birmingham. And I found him on Facebook. And it was funny. I contacted him and I said, you were the inspiration for me becoming a counselor. He goes, God, I don't think I inspired anybody back in those days. I had no idea. And I'm like, well, you inspired me.
Well,
So
I'm so glad that he did because you're here today.
yeah.
Um, and that is amazing. And I'm so happy about that. He's truly still giving out flowers even today. And so as I've mentioned, managing relationships, right? And breast cancer is a very multifaceted but important topic because I know we were talking a little bit before the recording about how complex relationships can be just in themselves, cancer or no cancer, relationships are hard, whether it's family, whether it's romantic, whether it's friends, whatever it is. And so I was really, really excited that you agreed to talk with us today to kind of break down those things about managing that, especially now someone might be dealing with breast cancer on top of these already difficult and complex relationships. So, kind of tell us a little bit about your thought process around like this particular topic related to breast cancer.
Yeah, sure, sure. So, one thing I do want to acknowledge is my little statement that I acknowledge that all people who are diagnosed with breast cancer include, though, men, transgender people, and people who are non-binary. So I do want to put that out there. But yeah, so how I did this, and I learned a lot from doing this process as well, um, or doing this research. I broke it up into the types of relationships that we have. And of course, there's probably even more relationships, but I broke it up into like family, which will include our spouse or partner, our children, and then extended family. Because obviously some of us are not married and we do not have children. And so extended family, grandparents, parents, siblings. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about getting back out there in the dating world if you are single, and you want to date. And then talking about friendships, that can be very complex. And then talking about professional relationships, with your coworkers, colleagues. Um, and we'll get into that. So let me start with family. And if I look like I'm reading off, as I told Janita before, if I look like I'm reading off a piece of paper, I am.
There is nothing wrong with notes.
This is how I interview. All right. So we talked a little bit about an illness like cancer can change your relationships, obviously, with the people in your life. So it's normal to notice changes in the way that you relate to family and your friends and other people that you are around every day. It is also normal to notice changes, though, in the way that they might relate to you. Okay, because some of those changes might not feel very good, or they look really odd, and sometimes annoying and sometimes awesome, just depends. So if we look at family, so one area that a family affected by cancer is likely to see change is in the roles of each family member and their responsibilities. So if we look at first, I want to look at households where, we have young children, teenagers, and then there's, a partner or a spouse. So if we break it down even more, in a two-parent household, so what we can find sometimes is the other parent's time can become more centered around taking care of their spouse or their partner, while they're also trying to manage working a full-time job, right? And then everything else. So what we'll see a lot of the time, and I've seen this too with clients that I've worked with breast cancer, is a shift to where if you have, especially if you have teenagers, um, being asked to do more, hey, you know, mom, for the next few weeks, won't be able to take your siblings to school. We need you to do that, or we need you to take them to their soccer practice. We need, a little bit of help with you preparing meals. So you find the older siblings beginning to do maybe what some might already be doing some of these things, some not, right? So they're trying to digest the fact that their mom has breast cancer, and oh, wait a minute, now I'm doing all these other things, right? Um, okay, that was it for that. All right, now let's look real quick in a single parent household. So younger kids, may have to spend more time with extended family members. So, for instance, their grandparents, aunts, uncles, whether or not grandma moves in for a period of time, or, hey, you're going to stay at grandma's a little bit more often or with your aunt or whatever. And then you have the teenagers. They may feel they need to take on the role of the other parent that is not present, right? So there's that shift. And again, it doesn't obviously happen with every, I mean, again, going back to teenagers, all different maturity levels. But, either way, those roles are shifting. It is also not unusual to see changes in our kids' behavior. So, for instance, toddlers and preschoolers might show aggressive behaviors, like they might start bedwetting or being more clingy. School-age children may experience academic challenges, difficulty concentrating. They may even be getting in trouble a little bit more, getting more phone calls from the school. And then preteen and teenagers might exhibit withdrawal from the family and they too, or engage in risk-taking behaviors. And again, these are not definite, but those are some things.
So
That,
these are kind of like possible side effects
yes,
from the diagnosis. Like, hey, like mom is no longer able to be as present as she was, or your caretaker is no longer able to be as present as they were. There are some shifting emotions. I mean, because the person who's diagnosed with breast cancer themselves is trying to digest the information and make the adjustments and do all of the medical things and the many things that come with just navigating treatment. And so these things you're listing are possible things that you could see in children who have a parent diagnosed with breast cancer.
yep, absolutely. And then even the example that I gave with the fella that I nannied, I feel it's weird to say nanny, he was 14, but the kid I watched, even though his mom had passed away from breast cancer 2 years prior, he had not had any therapy. He had not, I'm not going to say he hadn't dealt with anything, but things were still very raw for him. And he was angry. And it was very clear that he was angry. He was angry that his dad got remarried. He was angry that he had now these three extra siblings. So yeah, even many years afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
deal with it, that can happen. So, um, so overall, what we want to do is you help your children understand that you're being treated for cancer. And this is a little tidbit that I found. Children of cancer survivors have said that they have found the following things most important. I thought this was kind of cool. So there was children interviewed, and this is what they found to be the most important thing for them. So parents being honest with them about what's happening. So not, "Oh, they're too delicate, they're too young, whatever it might be. They want you to be honest with them. Speaking as directly and openly as possible, allowing them to become informed about your cancer and involved in your recovery. So, what I've seen for some people, excuse me, what I've seen for some people is like I had one client that sat down, like they found as many books and like fun videos that they could find for I think the child was like 8 or 9, and sat down with them and watched these videos about, you know, cancer and what this is like and what they may experience, and read books, obviously kid sort of geared books and stuff. But yeah, so helping them be informed too and helping them understand as best as they can. And it may not be mom, it may be even more dad or sibling that may take on that role. And also just trying to spend extra time with them. Um, but don't get wrapped up in guilt. That's for a whole nother day. But trying to spend extra time with them. And it's also okay because there's going to be some times when you're not feeling well. And it's okay not to be spending extra time. So, um,
So
so
taking out the unknown kind of
yes,
helps. Yeah.
yes, exactly, exactly. Um, Hold on while I take a sip of my water, y'all.
Oh, you're
Yeah, I got
fine.
a frog in my throat.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of a human feeling though, right? Like we fear so much of the unknown. And so we forget that our children, those we care for, also feel that fear based on what we experience, right? And so it makes sense that, hey, I'm going to take out the unknown in a way that you can comprehend.
Right.
Now, that might not change your anger. It might not change the resentment of the role change, but it does like breed understanding. So, based on your research, based on the work that you've done, what would you say would be helpful for those types of situations where you're a parent and you're diagnosed with breast cancer and you say, hey, I'm seeing these changes in the relationships with my children. They are just really short with me. They're very angry with me, or they're overcompensating for things because they feel bad for me and they don't really know how to make the situation better. But it's causing a strain on our relationship because they're overstepping some boundaries. Like, my treatment might not look like what they think it should look like. And, I might not be able to act the way that they want me to act. So, what are some things that you think would kind of help a parent navigate a situation like that, where, like, hey, my children are making some adjustments. I've laid it out for them how it goes. I've taken the unknown aspect out of it. But how do I like find a healthier space for this relationship? What's like the first step that someone could take?
So that's a good question. I think definitely trying to navigate, I guess, in a sense. All right, so I'm the parent and I'm giving as much as I can, right? Um, but hey, guess what? I might need some help. And being okay with asking for help. Help in the sense of, you know what? I'm gonna get Susie into some counseling, right? To help her in her own way be able to process through everything that is happening, right? So with play therapy, or if it's, a teenager, talk therapy, just to have that other sounding board, that person, that therapist that is, hey, everything's confidential. This is a place where you can cry and cry and cry, or feel your anger and not feel guilty, right? Um, because that can happen too. Well, I need to stay strong for my mom. It's like, you know what, you need a space where you don't feel like you have to stay or be strong. So definitely looking into, if you feel like you need a little bit more, looking into getting the kids or their adolescent their own therapist to be able to process.
So what are some differences that a person could see? And thank you for that response, by the way. But what
Yeah.
are some differences that you can see between or like what are some additional complexities that a person might need to explore with distant family members or a intimate partner? Like what are some differences and what are some things that you could expect to see in those situations? And how does a person kind of navigate something that was already kind of going through something and then now breast cancer is on top of this? How does a person even start to kind of sort through that? Because they have to make sure that they maintain the best mental space that they can for what they're going through. But these relationships are important and these relationships are still going to be there. So what are some things that you've seen and what are some suggestions that you have in navigating those situations?
Okay, so that is excellent, and that is where I'm going to pick up, because I think definitely dealing with, again, specific family. We have, we look at our spouse or our partner. That can be a whole other ball game. So tips for dealing with family issues. So how do I cope with these family issues? Like I've got this going on and now I've got this going on. How do I cope? So some thoughts are: let family know what to expect. as you heal and what not to expect from you. Now, again, somebody may say, well, I don't even know what to expect. And that's okay too. Absolutely. But hey, there's going to be some downtime. I'm going to be going to appointments. I'm not going to be feeling well. I'm not going to be able to take you places. I might be grumpy as hell and just know I may not be myself for a little while, and that's okay, and letting them know what to expect. So, in other words, do not feel like you have to keep up with the house or whatever it might be that, oh, but I'm the PTO president. If they even have that anymore, but letting people know what you can and cannot do, and setting reasonable expectations for yourself and stop apologizing. That's a little tidbit that I added to that. Like, stop apologizing. We apologize way too much. And, like somebody will bump into us and we'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's like, what am I apologizing for? So yeah, stop apologizing. Also giving yourself time because it's a huge adjustment. No one involved in this process is going to be the same afterwards. It's a huge adjustment. Work toward being very open, forthright with one another, all your family members, to help ensure that each family member's needs are being met as best as they can be. We're always going to have somebody's needs that they don't feel like they're being met. Okay, we'll deal with that later. Right now, this is what's happening in this moment. This is what I need, right? So to get a little bit into like your relationship with your spouse or partner. Okay, so how will your spouse partner be affected? So as one person put it, which I thought this was a great way to put it, coping with breast cancer as a couple is like having to rebuild the ship while navigating a turbulent sea. Yes. They too, our spouse, our partner, they are going to face a time of readjustment. I looked up a study. This was a study of 48 spouses, partners whose wives were newly diagnosed with breast cancer. They described their responses to their wife's breast cancer diagnosis as shock, rage, devastation, sadness, fear, grief, worry, and guilt. So there's guilt, possibly, that they're not going to be able to do enough for you, or that they're not doing enough either. I'm not doing enough, or, I don't know what else to do, right? This sense of like, I feel so guilty. I don't know what to do next. They worry about what the future holds. So they worry about their partner's survival rate and the reoccurrence of cancer, right? Just like you very well probably do. That's going through their heads as well. Grief over how your life was with your partner before cancer. And then, of course, concerns around sexual intimacy. I found a lot of information on this. So clearly, it's a huge thing that everybody, not everybody, but some people are like, oh my God, I want to talk about that. But, it's part of life, right? So we have to talk about it. So they may not want to mention, right? So your spouse or your partner may not want to mention or even initiate any kind of sex for fear of upsetting you or hurting you. Or if, maybe they themselves need some therapy, right? Because they have, oh, what if I'm rejected, right? It's like, oh my God, it's not about you, but that too might be for another day. Something too that we talked about was, before you guys came on, was just the percentage of divorces that happen, and for different reasons. I mean, sometimes it happens because the relationship, the marriage, partnership already was sort of dissolving, and then this happened, right? um so that can also happen. Now, how might you be affected? Well, guess what? Just like your partner and spouse, you're likely experiencing all those things as well: shock, rage, devastation, sadness, fear, grief, worry, guilt. So grief around losing your breast, right? So changes to or removal of your breast can have an impact on how you see and feel about your body as a whole. Shocked that someone as young as you has been diagnosed with breast cancer, right? Like, wait, what? I'm 21. This cannot be happening, right? Shocked that someone with no breast cancer history in their family, they're diagnosed with breast cancer. Fear that your spouse partner will find you less desirable or will altogether leave you. Okay. And then guilt that you cannot do the things maybe that you once did so effortlessly with your kids or with your friends or with your spouse. Um, so tips for talking to your partner. So when it may be difficult at first, try to be open and honest about how you are feeling and what you both now expect from sex and intimacy. This can avoid mixed signals and can make your partner aware of your limits. And that might need to be done with a marriage and family therapist, right? Um, Sometimes those things, can be difficult, right? And so you may want to do that with a marriage and family therapist of your own to help you guys navigate that. Talk when you're not being intimate, right? So you don't feel awkward or interrupted during those times. It's just a suggestion, right? Some people that maybe wouldn't even, but for some people, yeah, maybe before you get to that position. Talk about the things that you've been enjoying as well as those that you have found difficult, because this can help you both to feel encouraged and relaxed. If there are aspects of intimacy that you feel uncomfortable discussing in person, try emailing or texting. It is an option. Writing a letter, maybe not texting. Some people text. I'm all about the good old fashioned letter sometimes. Um, Feels more personal.
Mhm.
And then keep talking to each other to make sure you are clear about any boundaries, and that you have the same expectations. So that is with family. I'm going to go a little bit into dating now. Ah,
One thing before you even started about dating, one thing that I've learned, just like kind of listening to your responses, in these different buckets of relationships, it sounds like clarity also comes with boundaries in each of these situations, to help navigate those in a healthier way for the person who's diagnosed, but I mean also for them, right? Because now you know what the needs are, now you know where I'm at, and I know where you're at. So it sounds like if we do our best to like remove the perception of being attacked and accept that we cannot control this change that is happening, but we can control how we communicate with each other. And with that communication, we can implement some healthy boundaries like, hey, I know you're still mad because I said your sweet potato pie was nasty last Christmas. However, we're in June now, and I don't care about that pie. This is what I'm going through, and I need your help because I love you. I just don't like your pie, and we can talk about that later. So just being able to like respectfully, of course, have these conversations is what kind of benefits all in the situation. Is kind of what I'm hearing you say. In between all of these different buckets, that one thing remains consistent.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Boundaries. And again, communicating, talking about what it is that you need, like all parties, but especially if we're just looking at, our spouse or our partner. One thing that's always important to remember is that people cannot read our minds, right? Boy, ooh, if they could, right? We can't read, we can't read your minds, right? So unless we verbalize, use our words to talk about some of these things, even though we might think, oh my God, well, they should know. Why do I have to tell them? Well, guess what? You know, you still might have to tell them, even if we've told them 15 times. Um,
And
so
tell them for you, not even necessarily for them, but tell them for you.
yeah,
um
and
is
not personalizing stuff as much too. that's already hard to do in everyday life, right? Not taking things personally, especially from people that we love and we respect, and they say something, and it's like, what did you just say?
Mhm.
But really working on, not personalizing every little detail, every little thing, because, opinion or thoughts are not fact. And that's always a good thing to remember.
And sometimes people just that we talk about it frequently, especially with individuals who, I mean, really, once you think about just going through anything, some people they want to support you and they don't know how, and so they jumble up some words that they think they go well together, and they say it to you with the best of intention, and they're probably not going to understand why it hurts. They're probably not going to understand if it's the wrong thing to say. So sometimes in those moments, though, because it does hurt, because it does feel insensitive, it can feel like, oh my gosh, like this person is talking to me crazy. They don't care about what I'm going through. They don't care about what I'm feeling. They're just saying whatever. When really in their mind, they're like, no, like I love you. I'm just trying to support. I didn't mean it like that. So I mean, it can be very difficult, especially when you're in the height of a crisis or, anything that is changing your life in a way that you wouldn't want it to change.
Yep. Yeah. Change is uncomfortable, and it's inevitable, and it's necessary. 'Cause it's the way the world goes. It's just how things are, right? So yeah, absolutely. Um, so let's look for a second at dating. All right. So if any of y'all are single, so all right, so what if we're single and we want we want companionship, right? Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's like, thank you, Lord, I'm so glad I'm single. But that's not for everybody, right? Some people really want the companionship. And especially if it's a situation to where your partner or spouse left you, right? Yeah, you may not want to jump immediately into, going on the dating websites. But that's neither here nor there. I don't judge if somebody does, right? Just saying, you know, it can happen at any time where we're in this position, and it's normal to want companionship. All right, so we ask ourselves, well, should I date? Will anyone want to date me? And what the heck do I tell a potential partner about my cancer? And when? Do I tell them? Do I tell them on the first date? Do I not tell them? Do I just wait until I make sure it works out? What do we do? Right? Okay, so a few things to consider asking yourself. Number one, where am I on my cancer journey? Okay, and these are things that we're going to ask ourselves maybe before we throw ourselves back into the dating world. Okay, so where am I on my cancer journey? Am I ready to take this on? How much energy do I have to just be out there, to socialize, to give of myself, to share of myself, right? And then how mentally prepared do I feel to navigate conversations about my health? Okay. So, some suggestions are you may want to begin by working on other areas at first in your social life. So, maybe instead of like throwing yourself right back in and then, like, okay, I got to navigate these waters, maybe begin by just, spending time with your friends, with your family, maybe taking a class, like an online class, or anywhere where you're socializing. Like my kiddos this week taking a 3-hour sewing class every day, right? So anywhere, something that's of interest of you, and you're going to be meeting people, and hey, oh, I love your project that you're working on. Or even joining a support group. Okay, so sexual activities can always increase your comfort level in being around people, and just kind of sharing, not necessarily your journey of what you're going through immediately, but just beginning to kind of navigate those waters. Focus on what you feel that you can and you cannot bring to a new relationship right now. Okay. So you may consider sharing or not sharing your cancer diagnosis right out of the gate. Okay, now I think this one I think is really important. And this is one of those where it's like, there is no right or wrong. We are all individuals and we need to make our own choices. So one person may choose to not share their cancer diagnosis until they feel they have established a sense of trust with this person, right? While someone else may feel that it's vital to share their cancer diagnosis because they feel like that's a way to begin to establish trust, right? Again, it depends. It's up to you. You get to decide that, right? Whether or not you feel like you gotta, hey, hi, yes, I've just recently was diagnosed with breast cancer, or if you want to wait and make sure, like I don't know if I really just trust saying this to this person. And especially now, I mean, most people, do online dating, right? So you might be, you know communicating through text back and forth for the first couple of weeks, right? Um, Another part is think about dating as a learning process with the goal of having a social life that you enjoy. So remember, not every date has to be a success, as some people reject you, which can happen with or without cancer, right? Like, well, you know what? I was rejected a couple times back when I was 21 and hot and woo, and I thought, right, okay, we can get rejected. And that's another area where it's like, and I know this is hard, but try not to personalize or go immediately to thinking, oh my God, it's because I have this cancer. Because again, we don't know, they have maybe lost a parent, let's say their mom to breast cancer or father to cancer or whatever, right? And they maybe haven't fully accepted or dealt with that. And so when they hear, like, I just want to let you know, I do have cancer, they might go into their own panic mode, right? And shut down. And it's not that they're like, oh, I don't want to deal with that because they're being selfish. It's, oh, I can't do that. Oh God, I can't. And they might just ghost you, right? Not saying that that's a nice thing to do, but again, everybody's sort of on their own journey, right? And try not to judge others or assume that what they're doing is necessarily to genuinely be a jerk. Okay. Um, and then lastly, remember that before you had cancer, not all dates were a success. And there are some dating apps, and I looked these up and they are legit. One is called Cancer Match, and then another one is called Cancer Buddy. But those are specifically geared for people that are dealing with cancer. And so they can match you with somebody else that, has cancer, or it might even be somebody that doesn't have cancer, but maybe, or maybe they're a survivor of cancer, right? So there are dating apps. Any questions that you have before going to friendships?
This was really awesome. Now, I don't really have any questions. I didn't know. I think it's really interesting. I was writing that down about the apps. And I love that. You know what I'm saying? Because like it breaks that ice already. Like, I got something going on, hence the app. So it can kind of help take that awkward conversation that not everybody's as giving with information, and that's okay too. We all have a right to retain the information regarding our health. And so I thank you so much for providing that resource. Patty, it's just been so wonderful having you today to break down these topics. But before I end this recording, are there any final tips that you really want viewers and listeners to resonate with?
Um, Final tips. Probably some of the most important, I think, is to, and this goes with if we're looking at, um, again, the family unit, friendships, um, we get to make those choices, right? As far as like who we tell, how we share our story. Um, if we look at coworkers, you might be good buddies with, Tom over here and share the news, with Tom, and ask Tom, I don't want anybody else to know. But to other coworkers of yours, you may never share it with them because you don't have to. Or you may just choose to share it with your supervisor until you know exactly what's going on and what things are going to look like. So knowing that you have control over who you share with, who you do not share with, how much information you want to share, um, if you want to stay friends with somebody, or maybe they show you their true colors, and you decide, you know what? I really thought that this person was my friend, and they have not called me, texted me. They avoid the subject. They talk about themselves. I don't think this person needs to be in my life anymore. And then you'll have some people that will step up that you hardly even know. It could be the woman from yoga that you've talked to only a handful of times. Um, and next thing you know, she's got a meal train started and she says, I want to take you to your first appointment. And she actually shows up to take you to your first appointment. And it's kind of like, wow, this woman hardly even knows me. So yeah, you'll be surprised about some of that stuff too, because there's definitely a shift in our friendships and even work friendships, or, work relationships.
Well, thank you so much, Patty. It's just been so wonderful having you this morning. And I really appreciate all the information that you were able to kind of like walk us through today. And I'm sure like each of those sections could have their own coffee conversation, honestly, because like we discussed a little bit earlier, there is so many complexities to a relationship already. And then when you throw something as difficult as cancer on top of that, man, I mean, and some of it you kind of like briefly discussed, but even when we think about how we try not to personalize things, but I mean, breast cancer can change all aspects of a person's view of themselves and their body image and the insecurities that can develop from that. And like, what if you already were insecure in a relationship, whether it's with your family or whomever? And so I just really thank you so much for coming and speaking to us about this and providing this coffee conversation as a resource for someone who is diagnosed or has been diagnosed and kind of needs some guidance to like, where do I start to manage these relationships in a healthier way?
Yeah, absolutely. I was happy to do it.